Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us this week. We are excited to bring you another new industry professional, this time from the music industry. I cannot wait to hear more about this career path. So let's go ahead and get started. Christopher, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, April. Good to see you.
Yes.
Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday for sure. So, would you mind taking just a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Okay. Well, my name is Christopher Deep Henderson. Deep is like my producer name. And I'm a songwriter and a producer, either or both together. And I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, but I probably started most of my music production while I was living in Virginia. So I'm kind of also known as a Virginia producer. And I've been in Atlanta for a little over 10 years now. And yeah, that's pretty much how I started.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, too, that you have some pretty awesome credits to your name. Could you tell us some of the songs that you've wrote or produced and who you've worked with?
Okay, shoot, depending on the age group. So some of these you'll know, some of these your parents will know. So one of my more popular songs was Blame It by Jamie Foxx and T-Pain.
Yeah.
And that one won a Grammy in 2010. So that was a real, big deal. And I think it was number one for that year, actually, number one R&B hip hop song for 2009.
That's
and
awesome.
Another one was this song, even older than that, is Happily Ever After by Case. People might remember Beyonce being in the video, but that was all the way back in 99. And most recently, there's this guy, Dusty Locane, that just came out. He's a rapper, kind of a New York drill rapper, and I did some stuff on him, this song called Rumble.
That's really exciting. So when I think about a songwriter, when I think about a producer, it sounds like a very exciting career. But could you take us through what your typical normal day looks like when, I know it's going to be different every day, but what would your normal day look like to us?
Well, there's probably a couple of different sets of normal days. Okay, so let's see. If there's a normal day of creation and writing, then it's just about like let's say I'm driving or in the shower or something like that, and I come up with what I think might be a cool song idea. I'll go ahead and record it either in voice notes into my phone, or I'll write down the phrases or some way to remember it. And so then sometimes when I have a client and somebody might call and say, hey, we want you to work with this producer, or we want you to work with this songwriter, or we want you to work with this artist. And a lot of times when you're in the studio with a recording artist, they want you to start something from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you never know what day it's going to be, if it's going to be something where everything is snapping or not. And so a lot of times I'll go back in those notes of my phone when I was feeling it and kind of just depending on the situation, find if anything in my notes from other ideas kind of helps out today's session. Yeah. So an artist might call, or an artist manager might call, or a label might call, and they'll give me a description of the artist. They'll say her or his name. And it can be anything from like a female who sings R&B to someone who's more of a pop angle. Sometimes they have references to, you can go back and hear some songs that they've done. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's brand new and you just have to maybe hear something that the artist has done, or ask the artist himself, what they like. And you just have to be very reactive. There's a certain amount of preparation that you have, but even without that, even despite that preparation, or on top of that preparation, you still have to be very reactive because you're still in the customer service business. Mm-hmm. And so even if you have this great song, it might be too old, or the references might be too mature for this particular artist, or too immature for this particular artist. And so you're going to have to take that start of an idea that you had and start shaping it to fit and please that person in front of you.
Yeah. So I know I used to teach business marketing, and one of the concepts that I would teach students, and it's so important in the business world itself, is understanding your target audience, your target
Right.
market. So it sounds like there's a lot of that in what you do as well.
Yeah, there is. And also you're competing to get on an album a lot of times.
Hmm.
And so like I've worked with Trey Songz in the past, and who's some other people to name? Jacob Lattimore. There's some names I'm trying not to mention also. But it's like, sometimes you're trying to give them more of what their audience likes, but
Hmm.
then sometimes you're also trying to make the song that's going to be different from what everybody else is going to give them. And so
Hmm.
sometimes that might be something a little bit to the side of their market, or something like, expanding on what they normally do. And so it's always good to get in with the artist and find out if they're actually trying to grow in some sort of direction, and you can kind of beat somebody else to the punch.
Yeah, it sounds like you get to use a ton of creativity in your career, and every day is probably different. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
definitely.
So, could you tell us a little bit about your professional journey? I
Okay.
know you probably didn't start out on top. You probably didn't start out working with Jamie Foxx and Trey
Right.
Songz right out of the gate.
Right.
So, could you tell us, what did that professional journey look like for you?
Okay. So somewhere around middle school, I discovered I could play piano by ear.
Hmm.
And um, it was always just kind of a secret hobby. Like I was always writing songs, but I was playing football and running track, and I just didn't have that. Like I wasn't showing it off, but it was kind of a private hobby of mine. And so surprisingly, when I first, and in high school, I would actually do talent shows, but mostly I was backup. Like I would play keyboards for somebody singing, or kind of put an act together and be in a group. But I was always the one kind of organizing and telling people where to be, what to do, whether I was in front or not. You know what I mean? And so those were the early signs of me being in the or me being meant to be in the music business. But until I got some freedom, when I went to college, that's when I got a hold of a studio culture. Meaning, like there were certain students. There was a recording studio on campus, and so I was a physics major at first, but I ended up taking a couple of recording electives to
Hmm.
try to make sure I got into that music studio. And once I was in the studio, there was a culture of kids who were like doing it for years, like kids who were playing instruments for like 10 years already, and just kind of socializing with them, learning from them, and all of us learning from each other is pretty much what got me into knowing what to do in the studio. Um, I think one of the first lessons I learned is that, when you start doing things like musical by yourself, it's kind of an isolating habit, and you're pressing buttons to get them to do what you want to do. The next step is kind of learning how to talk to people and getting them to do what you would like them to do. You know what I mean? As far as coaching someone through vocals, coaching someone through what instrument they're playing. And I almost forgot the question. I'm so
The
sorry.
question was, tell us about your professional journey, which, I mean, this is so
Okay.
good. Such good information that you're giving us, because,
Right.
I love that you mentioned you started out in physics, and
Yes.
then so to me, how did you get from physics to where you are now? That's so interesting.
Well, okay. So I was a math and science geek in high school. And so they were always trying to press me to do something in math and science. They were saying that's where the scholarship money was, because it was a very Black male underrepresented. And
Hmm.
so, pressure from the parents is kind of why I was a physics major at the time. But then, on campus, there are no parents. And you get a lay of the land and see what's available and see what resources your school will have. And I kind of gravitated toward the music studio. But then what happened was that just being gravitated that way was one thing, but being encouraged was the other, because I found out how good I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the other kids telling me how good this idea was or how good this song was. And automatically I'd assume that I might not have been good because that wasn't my first thing. You know what I'm saying? So I would come across people who could play 12 instruments and people whose parents were in the business. So they had all this exposure to studio stuff ahead of me. But just coming in fresh, I could compete with them, or I could get their attention or do something just as good or better than them. And so it eliminated those jitters of maybe I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
And
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a good lesson to know when your confidence is increased. I mean, you can do anything when you have the confidence in yourself. And so it sounds like that encouragement really, is that where your career kind of took off?
Yeah, because I'm forgetting the key element. So we had this project in the recording class where we were supposed to engineer a song. And so I took that as an opportunity to engineer my own songs and finally get some of my ideas on tape. And so I did like 2 songs during the class period and got to mix them and got them finished so that they were on a finished piece of tape and CD back then. And for you guys, it'll be MP3s. But so I got it. I got a finished product, right? And it was just a class project. But Teddy Riley was in the area. Teddy Riley is this big producer who did Michael Jackson and has basically a whole era of music named after him, New Jack Swing. So look him up. But yeah, Michael Jackson. Who else would they know? Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston's husband. But he did he was a very popular and hot producer at the time. And so he was in the area. His studio was in Virginia Beach, and my school was in Hampton, Virginia, which wasn't too far from Virginia Beach. So he had a celebrity basketball game on campus, right? And during halftime, a friend of mine was able to play the song that I did over the speakers, and they caught him bobbing his head, like he was feeling it. And so then my friend approached him like, "Oh, you like that?" You know what I'm saying? And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Well, me and my friend, we produce." And he didn't really have anything to do with it, but I'll take the promotion. So Teddy invited me and that other guy over to the studio and, had me play more music. And he started inviting me regularly. And that was really the start, because so many producers that were working with him, and somebody he was working with at the time were the Neptunes and Rodney Jerkins, who were also, they would go on to be big producers in R&B, but they weren't big yet. They were still young interns, kind of like me, but further along than me. They were a couple years into it. And so, so it was weird to me that, this wasn't my best song. This was my only song. But it got me in the door and got him wanting to hear more. And my second song that I finally did, once I had his attention, got me further in the door, where he was having me work on some acts that he was doing. He had this female group he was developing at the time, and he had me do like 3 records on them. And this is still brand new. So that was a big confidence booster.
And you never know where opportunities are going to come from. I mean, that's crazy. It happened at a celebrity basketball game. That moment really played a huge role in your life. And I think that's just such good advice for students to hear, is that always be willing, always be ready, and always be just there to take that next step and be open.
Don't keep it to yourselves.
Yes.
The worst thing you can do is perfect it to death. I mean, it's good to be a perfectionist, but it's got to leave your mind, leave your desk, and somebody else has got to hear it. And then go ahead and take that criticism, because you can use that criticism and come back. It's like, as long as somebody knows what you're doing, they can get behind you. But if it's a secret, then nobody can get behind you.
That's so true. So I just from what I've seen and what I know a little bit about the music industry, that can be a pretty challenging industry to get
Right.
into. There's a ton of competition, and I'm sure that just like everyone else along the way, you've encountered obstacles. So, would you
Yeah.
mind taking a moment to talk to students about how you have overcome obstacles and what advice you might have for them in their future?
Okay. So one thing, guys, is that you it never is just easy. Some things are easy, but then once you go through some easy things, you'll run into something hard.
Hmm.
And so the most important thing is to know that there are several ways to go about something. Um, if you try one contact and that doesn't happen, don't be afraid to try other contacts on the side of them or their competition, or even down to someone's assistant or friend. There are many ways to get your stuff to the targets that you're trying to get it to. And yeah, it's perseverance. Sometimes things will go your way and go fast, but then there will be something in the deal that will be that you'll still have to push through. You know what I mean? Like if your first song is a hit, then it becomes, can you do it again? Can you do it again? And then that becomes the struggle on how do you repeat that success? Do you do the same thing, or do you think the same way? Or, you never really know when stuff happens your way. What out of all the 100 things that went into your work, what was the thing that really made it fly? You know what I mean? So it's always going to be trying and trying again and trying to learn from your mistakes and being willing to put things out there to make the mistakes.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that's great advice because everyone's going to make a mistake.
Right.
It's just whether or not you take that opportunity to learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've been in the industry for a long time and you have probably discovered careers along the way that you had no clue even existed when you were in high school. So that's one thing we love to do is we love to tell students about different opportunities that they may not have ever even heard of. So could you talk a little bit about some different roles and responsibilities in the music industry that maybe aren't very well known?
Definitely. Okay. So you're a music lover, maybe you're talented at music. There are lots of ways that you can get into it. There are friends of mine who didn't get into writing and producing for artists. And so they ended up doing film scoring. And so they got to, they were very good at putting instrumentals together, but maybe not full songs without some help. And so, they perfected that craft, they perfected that instrument. And, when they got to, they would network in circles where they were looking for music supervisors and people who look for songs for movies, film, and TV. And once they get a couple of those contacts, they were able to do a job, do it well, and get more of those contacts. Some friends of mine who might have started where I started found out that they're better at being able to network and get their song heard more so than actually getting a great song done. And so a lot of times they end up as A&R, which is artists and repertoire for record labels, which actually helps record labels and artists find and choose the material that they're going to use for their album and their single. And so they're an integral part of the music business, and they're music lovers, and they usually have some musical skill. They're just not song starters and song finishers. But yeah, there are lots of things within the record business that you can still turn a profit off of and still get deep into. Now, on my side of things, as far as songwriting and music production, you want to pair yourself with, you want to do a good self-assessment, find out what you're missing, and pair yourself with somebody who complements what you're missing. So if you can realize that you're better at writing songs and melody than you are at singing them or putting the instruments behind them, then you want to pair yourself with somebody who you find who's very good at putting instrumentals together, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, that's just such good advice for not just this industry, but all industries, all career paths, because you're not always going to be the best at everything. But if
Right.
you can create a team where you help each other and you
Right.
have the best elements of everybody, I think that's great advice. I love that.
Thanks.
So my last question, and then I have a few questions from students that we're going to get
Okay.
to. But my last question is, what is something that students could do right now while they're still in high school that could help them prepare them for a career maybe like yours?
Okay. Well, if you have a computer, there are and you have a phone, there are lots of programs for you to get started in music production as far as putting your ideas down. If you're more of there's even applications you can join, there's something called Splice, splice.com, where it has a bunch of not only drum sounds, but kind of song starts where there'll be like an instrumental royalty free, and anything that you can kind of get an idea to, you can kind of put those into one of your music programs like GarageBand or FL Studio. People who are into music will know what I'm talking about. But GarageBand comes with every Mac. It's a music program. And I think FL Studio is something that's either free or relatively cheap that you can get for the other computers, the Windows computers.
Yes.
Yeah. And so those are good starting programs where you can just kind of copy and paste tracks that exist or lay tracks down if you do play, and stack several tracks next to each other to get, your composition going. And they even have tracks where you can, go ahead and add audio to it if you sing. And so start off with one of those entry-level programs, GarageBand or FL Studio, and join applications like splice.com, or there's another one that I'm trying to remember. Because Splice has a lot of competition too, as far as these, it's like these shopping portals, almost like your Spotify's or your Apple Music, where it's just starts of song ideas, just instrumentals, single instruments that you can start putting together in songs and make them.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can start, when you have some finished product, just start promoting it on your social media and get people knowledgeable of what you do and how well you do it.
Yeah. And all of these different applications and software that you've mentioned, we'll be sure and drop those into the description.
Okay, cool. Because I'm going to remember some more once we stop talking.
We'll be sure. That way students can go directly to those links and see that. So, okay. So we have a few questions from students.
Okay.
First question that we have is, how do you get ideas for the songs that you write?
Okay. So, conversations. Some of the things you're going to go through yourself. Some of the things your friends are actually going to go through, and you're just the good translator for that experience. But a lot of songs, especially country music and R&B and rap, so I guess most music that's not instrumental is a form of storytelling. And so just like you and I are having a conversation, the best songs are conversational. So how do you speak to each other? What do you bring up first? It's like, and then, what are the main things you talk about, whether it's relationships or what you're going through, those make for good songs. And so even when, you're always drawn back and recalling a conversation when you're writing songs. So be a good listener.
Yes, be a good listener. So I'm sure you probably have a notebook or notes on your phone that you're constantly writing down ideas.
Right, exactly.
So the next question is the artist involved in the songwriting process?
Yes and no. So it depends. It's artist for artist. Some artists are like completely involved. Like you're not going to sell them a complete song. And then at the start of my career, most of my songs were already finished before I got it to the artist. But because, I was new, so that was really the only way I was going to get in the room with the artist was by proving to somebody that I had something for them to, that it was beneficial for them to let me in the room. You know what I'm saying? So some artists are completely involved. Some artists will take a song that you wrote, but they might change some things to make it more them or more their language.
Yeah. So that's a perfect lead into the next question is, what has been your favorite artist or song to work on?
Okay. Okay, so a lot of my favorite artists to work with, you haven't heard of yet because they're some of the new folks. But I really like this girl, Jailyn Josie, Jailen Josie. I think she's really dope and she's new and she's from Atlanta. But as far as artists that were really good to work with, Jamie Foxx was definitely one of my favorite sessions. Because he's an actor, he's used to being coached and directed. And so he came to me wanting exactly to be directed, exactly, how to say certain words, what inflections to use. And so it was good working with him. And it was also kind of funny because in between, the vocal takes, like a lot of famous friends came to see him. And so they're having all these interesting conversations behind me while I'm like editing. So that was real cool and interesting.
I can imagine that was definitely one of those pinch me moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. And it was funny because it was going on behind me and I wanted to finish my part. So I didn't want to act like I was slacking off my job and participate. So most of it was I could hear them behind me and oh, Brett Ratner. It was all these people were coming behind me and start hearing drinks pouring. I'm just work fast so I can do it. But yeah, that was a cool session.
I have enjoyed so much learning about your career, and I have no doubt your advice and your words of wisdom are going to be exactly what students need to hear. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Is there any last minute words of wisdom you would like to leave with our students?
Well, if you guys want to catch up with me, I also give other advice on music, and I even do demonstrations and kind of songwriting and production workshops at SongBuildersTV.com.
Okay.
Everything's spelled correctly, SongBuildersTV.com. I start putting some of the stuff on YouTube as well, so you might catch me there at Deep Song Builders. And yeah, just perseverance is the main thing.
Yes.
Just definitely keep working.
And we'll be sure and link that in the comments as well, too. That way students can connect with you and check out. So.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. Be sure and check back next week. We'll have a brand new industry professional, and you guys have an awesome day.
Thanks, April.